we vote leave and take back control.
Remember this?
Mr. Speaker, we are going to leave the European Union in March 2019.
How about this?
Anything which fails to respect the referendum or which effectively divides our country in two would be a bad deal. And I have always said, no deal is better than a bad deal.
Or even this.
Because of course we all respect the result of the referendum.
For well over nearly 3 years now, the UK has been trying to leave the EU, but failing. We were promised a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take back control of our laws, our money, and our borders. And still, it has not been delivered. If anything, our establishment has been consistently tampering with our laws, funding the wrong campaigns, and holding a knife point at our borders.
So this amendment applies to some of the powers of the finance bill, means the government would not be able to use them to pursue no deal unless it had come back to Parliament first and asked Parliament's permission, or has looked to extend Article 50.
The Remainers have been trying to take back control of the process.
Only Parliament can grant rights to the British people, and only Parliament can take them away.
Trying to change the British Constitution, which only vaguely asserts Parliament at its heart, by writing Parliament into stone at the British heart. Therefore prolonging the Article 50 process further, allowing time for a general election, a second referendum, or even fully revoking Article 50 and remaining in the EU altogether.
We are not opposing or calling for a second referendum. The referendum, the people decided that we should leave the European Union, and we respect that decision. However, as time has gone by, as you well know, the information that we're receiving about the terms and conditions of that separation are quite unlike the terms and conditions that were spoken of so loosely during the 2016 campaign.
They've been funding the People's Vote campaign, starting new parties.
We're determined to give you a people's vote so that you can vote based on what Brexit is today, not the undeliverable fantasy that we were told it would be 3 years ago.
And creating unlikely alliances.
Our focus is very much on legislative options to extend Article 50 and to find the way to do that.
But most importantly, they, just like the Leavers, have been holding a knife point at the border. Stop these goods and these people, and the economy crashes, they say.
The Tory party will be toast unless we're out by the end of October.
The Leavers have also been trying to take control of the process, trying to use every mechanism they can to push through every version of leaving the EU that they can.
What I'm talking about is not a further exchange of letters, but a significant and legally binding change to the withdrawal agreement. Negotiating such a change will not be easy. It will involve reopening the withdrawal agreement, a move for which I know there is limited appetite among our European partners.
First, it was the withdrawal agreement, which to many was too lenient anyway, but May tried every cocktail mix to try and failed to get that through Parliament.
We're not going to wait until October the 31st before getting on with our plans to take this country forward. And to do that, we need new legislation. We've got to be bringing forward new and important bills, and that's why we are going to have a Queen's speech, and we're going to do it on October the 14th.
Then it was Johnson and his no-deal antics, which meant running down the clock and suspending Parliament, just so they could hold the EU to ransom in an attempt to remove the backstop.
Frankly, given where we are, no deal is the best deal. It's the only acceptable deal. You see, even without the backstop, this is the worst deal in history.
If it wasn't for the huge success of the Brexit Party, Boris Johnson, the strong leaver, might not even be our Prime Minister right now. And then, of course, is the border, most notably the Irish one. Keep us inside the customs union and single market, as the backstop does, and democracy is dead, they say. So is the UK in crisis? Are we heading down a deep abyss of dictatorship under Boris Johnson and a collapsed economy? Or are we going to be saved from such shackles by blissfully remaining in the EU? Okay, well, the first thing to point out is that neither remaining in the EU or leaving the EU without a deal do what they say on the tin. Remaining in the EU doesn't necessarily mean maintaining our current relationship with the EU as it stands. Nor does it mean necessarily that parliamentary democracy would be restored, because of course it could be that this parliament, which mostly wants to remain in the EU, could tie the hands of a future parliament if it wanted to leave. Our relationship with the EU is just as determined by our reputation as a country. So for example, if this parliament made it harder to make trade deals with other countries, for example by staying in a customs union, it might be that a future parliament is tied down by economic needs to remaining in the EU as a better option, for example, during a recession. Or it could be that a law is passed so that EU referendums are only held once in a generation. Or it could be that despite the wishes of a referendum, Parliament must also in future ratify the vote. Either way, I'm sure there will be some MP saying in the future that lessons must be learnt, whatever outcome Brexit presents us with, which means future policy to stop it happening in the same way at least again. But leaving the EU without a deal as well isn't necessarily what you might expect. The government is already making plans to mitigate the effect of a no deal on the economy and business. But also, in parliamentary terms, proroguing Parliament to run the clock down for a no deal doesn't mean that we're in a dictatorship. If anything, it means the opposite. First of all, Parliament will try and make legislation to stop a no deal. Then Parliament will try and hold a motion of no confidence and cause a full general election. It couldn't be more democratic than a full election.
We vote leave and take back control.
But also, taking back control is often used as a defence against proroguing Parliament.
What were we told during the referendum campaign? We were told that we were going to restore parliamentary sovereignty. We were told we were taking back control of our laws. And yet this unelected Prime Minister is shutting down Parliament, which was supposed to be sovereign once again, and its ability to make legislation as we approach the greatest upheaval at any point in our history since the end of World War II.
But it's worth remembering that this promise was on the condition that the UK left the EU. And of course, stopping a parliament that could potentially stop Brexit helps to do all that. But the biggest overreaction about all of this is that it's all somehow going to lead to a massive constitutional battle. Court cases, no confidence motion, legislation, elections, Corbyn as Prime Minister. But the reality might end up being much more plain than that. It all depends if the UK and the EU can agree an alternative to the backstop within 30 days. If they do that, or if they're at least close to doing that, then Parliament might be much calmer when they come back and actually agree with leaving the EU with a deal. It's unlikely right now because Boris Johnson has set an extremely tight deadline to an extremely complex problem to do it by the 31st of October. But October the 14th, which also happens to be my birthday, is the day Parliament comes back. That's when options such as a second referendum, a general election, etc. should be opened up, if a deal can't be agreed by then. Now is not the time to go crazy. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.